Hello, friends, and welcome back to Pony Plays Card Games. I'm your pony, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play the My Little Pony card game by Kayou. So, I'm going to start with how to set up the card game and what you're going to need. First off, the easiest way to get everything you'll need to play the game is in one of the starter decks. They come with a main character card, which you place over here on the game mat. You'll need a deck of 15 scene cards, which do not have to be the same card. You can have any different scene cards you want in your deck. You shuffle those, and you place them over here. You'll need a deck of 50 main deck cards, which are between characters, events, and item cards. You'll shuffle that and place it over here. And you'll need 4 story cards, stages 1 through 4, from the same story, which is what we have here. You'll lay these out like so. Then you draw a 5-card hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, off the top of your deck. And without looking at these, you're allowed to look at your hand, but without looking at these, you take the 4 top cards of your deck and put them face down on top of your story cards, and these are your plan cards. And then, to finalize setup, you take the top card of your scene deck and flip it up and put it into play as your first scene card. So, that is how you set up for a game of My Little Pony the card game, and your opponent will have done the exact same. You then determine who goes first, which for this example, I have an example set up of a mid-game state for Pinkie Pie over there, but we're just going to say that Twilight Sparkle will be going first in this game. So here's the hand of cards, a few character cards, an event card, and an item card. So you can tell what the cards are by their card type up here. The characters have that horseshoe symbol, the events have that little piece of paper, and the item cards have the treasure chest symbol. You can also tell by the colour of the cards, with the items being blue, the events being this orange to red, and character cards actually come in a bit of a range of colours, depending on what theme, I suppose, based on which of the main 6 they're nearest to, but the colour of them doesn't really matter as much. And they also have down here their inspiration value, because most cards of the other types just have a cost, which characters also have. So, on to the actual playing of the game. To start your turn, you have 4 phases in your turn that your turn runs through. The start of turn phase, where you take any card that is knelt, which means any of the cards that are sideways that you have in play, and you stand them back up so that they're vertical again. You then take the top card of your scene deck and flip it out into play as a new scene card. Every single turn, you just get a brand new scene card off the top of your deck until that scene deck runs out. And you draw a new card. Now, the person going first on their very first turn of the game, though, skips drawing a card. That's an important thing, but the person who's going second does get to draw a card on their very first turn, just the person going very firstest. Then you move on to your main phase. So the main phase is where you play the cards in your hand, and any cards that have abilities that work while they are in the adventure zone, which is what that little black bar there means, you can use those abilities. So this card has an ability that while it's in the adventure zone, you can kneel it to draw a card and discard a card. So if it was our main phase and we had this Twilight Sparkle in our adventure zone, we could kneel her to draw a card, and then pick a card from our hand and send it to our rest area. But to play cards from your hand, which is generally the main thing you'll be doing in this phase, you need to kneel scene cards equal to the cost of the card that you're looking to play. So in this example, where we have 2 scene cards right now, we have this lovely 1 cost spike here that we could play. So we would kneel one of our scene cards, take this character, and pick any free zone in our adventure zone, which there are 3 maximum that you can have, and place this spike character into that zone. Now, if we had more scene cards, additionally, we could play more expensive cards, such as this Twilight Sparkle, who costs 3. So, the longer the game goes, the more scene cards you have, which means the more cards you can play in a turn and the higher the cost of the cards you can play in a turn. Now, something to note is that if a scene card is face down, you can still kneel it to pay costs. Your scene cards will be turned face down during the game, but it doesn't change their ability to pay the cost of cards. And even though this scene card here is the Golden Oaks Library, you can use it to pay the costs of cards that are not Twilight Sparkle. So if I had this 3-cost Rainbow Dash in my hand, I could use these 3 scene cards to pay the cost for this Rainbow Dash and put her into one of my free zones in the Adventure Row. There's no restriction on what scene cards you can use to pay for the costs of what cards. So that's how you play a character card. You pick one of your empty zones, you put it in after paying the harmony cost by tapping your scene cards, or kneeling your scene cards in this game. Then you have got here event cards. So event cards you play by paying the harmony cost up in the top corner, just like any other card. But these do not require you to have any free zone in your adventure zone to go into. Instead, they just have an ability, like this one here says to draw 2 cards. You use that ability, and you put them into your rest area. So that is how you use an event card. And for item cards, you have, again, got the cost in the top corner. But for these, you need to have a character out that they can be attached to. So not all of them have a restriction on which character you're allowed to attach them to, but this one, for example, the book, has a requirement that can only be attached to a Twilight Sparkle character. So we would pay its harmony cost by kneeling our scene cards, and then we would attach this to our Twilight Sparkle, and it will have an effect while it's attached to her. So that is how you play all of the different kinds of cards during your main phase of your turn. After the main phase, you move on to the interaction phase. Now, for the first turn of both players, each player's first turn of the game, you skip the interaction phase. The interaction phase is akin to the combat phase of other games. It's when your characters will interact or do battle with your opponent's characters, see which ones last through the phase or which ones go to the rest area, and also see if you can make any direct hits on your opponent. So, remembering that we skip this for the first turn of both players, so me being the first player, I have a turn where we don't interact, then Pinkie Pie being the second player, we have a turn, no interactions, then when it comes back to me for my second turn of the game and then onwards, we have the interaction phase. And interactions, from then onwards, it is not optional. If I have got a character and you have got a character who are in the same column, then we must interact, even if mine is weaker and I really don't want to do it. It's a very important thing to note. So, here is an example of how an interaction phase would work. What the interaction phase is going from left to right of the person who took the first turn of the game. On both players' turns, it goes in the exact same direction. We will look and see if the current turn player has characters in any of the columns. And starting with the leftmost of the first player column, we then see if our opponents have got a character in the same column as one of our characters, or if they do not. So, starting with here, I have got a character, which is this 4 Inspiration Twilight Sparkle. When characters are interacting, they interact based on their inspiration value. So my 4 Inspiration Twilight here will be interacting with Pinkie Pie's 3 Inspiration Pinkie Pie character. That's the other character in the column. Now, how this would go down is that generally, if my character's inspiration was higher than your character's inspiration, I would win the interaction and your character would be moved to the rest area. If yours was higher than mine, I would lose the interaction and my character would be moved to the rest area. And if we were tied for inspiration, we would both be moved to our owner's respective rest areas. But before we interact, we both have the chance to inspire our characters. To do this, we use our scene cards. Because scene cards, while they're face up, have got this inspire ability, which references to a specific character, for example with the Golden Oak Library, Twilight Sparkle, and you are allowed to flip this card face down to give her +1 inspiration for the turn. And you can do this with any number of your scene cards, but you have to declare all of them at once, starting with the person whose turn it is. So if I want to flip 2 of my cards over to inspire my Twilight Sparkle, and they can be ready cards or knelt cards, doesn't matter, you can flip them. I will define how powerful I want my Twilight Sparkle to be. Then my opponent gets the chance to inspire by flipping face down any of their face-up scene cards, readied or knelt, to improve the power level of their character. This means that seeing as I have to go first, and there's no coming back to it if I left some readied and face up, or just face up, if I left any of these face up because I didn't feel I needed to buff Twilight Sparkle that much, and my opponent suddenly made their Pinkie Pie way bigger than my Twilight Sparkle, I would not be allowed to go, well actually I then want to flip more. You define, as the person whose turn it is, how big your character is, and then your opponent gets to choose how much they want to inspire their character, and then we move to interacting. If my character is bigger than my opponent's character, then I win. Tie is a tie and we both go to the rest area, and again, if I'm smaller, I lose and go to the rest area. An important thing to note for what comes in the deck is that the decks come with a lot of characters that are not Twilight Sparkle or Pinkie Pie, such as Spike here. Even if I have got face-up scene cards, if they are not scene cards that specifically say they can inspire Spike, I cannot use them to inspire him. So if this 2 inspiration Spike is weaker just at base than my 3 inspiration Pinkie Pie on my opponent's field, then Spike is going to lose the interaction because I've got nothing to buff him with. So that is how 2 characters in the same column will interact, and all the different variants on that. Then if I have got a character who is in a column where my opponent does not have a character, and it is my turn to interact, I get to use a direct hit effect. There are 2 direct hit effects for you to choose from. you can either interrupt an opponent's plan or advance your story. So, how to interrupt your opponent's plan is that you take the plan card, this face down card here, that is on the lowest level stage of your opponent's story, and you have them reveal it. Now, what could happen here is that they could just get a card, and if it has no plan ability, it is added directly to the hand. Or they could find a card that has a plan ability, which is what this red box here means. This card says plan, draw 2 cards. If they reveal a card with a plan ability, then the ability is triggered, they do what it says, and then the card goes to their rest area. So, if it has a plan ability, you use the effect, and then it goes to their rest area. They use the effect, to be very clear, your opponent gets this ability, and then it goes to their rest area, or they get their plan card to their hand, but you get to see what it is regardless. So that is how to interrupt an opponent's plan. But if they have got a story stage card that does not have a plan card on it, and you are not currently up to that stage in the story, you can instead advance your story. To do this, instead of interrupting their plan, you say, for my direct hit effect, I would like to advance my character 1 stage in my story. It does not matter if you have or have not got a plan card on that stage of the story, you're allowed to advance to it. You can advance all the way through your story without losing a single plan card of your own, which would actually be a really good thing, because the plan cards are used as a blocker to stop your opponent from moving up in their story. When you progress in your story, you get to trigger the story ability on that card. This one says when you reach this stage in the story, draw 1 card. Now, you may notice that Pinkie Pie has 2 stages of her story with no plan cards. That does not mean we move immediately to stage 2. We, for a direct hit effect, get to progress 1 stage in our story, 1 at a time, but you can clear off as many of your opponent's story stages you want before you start progressing, or if you get a direct hit, you can clear a stage and then your next direct hit move up, however you want to do that. But you're not allowed to move up to a stage where your opponent's story card of that stage still has its plan card on top. That is blocking your progress, so a direct hit would instead have to interrupt their plan because you're not allowed to progress your story in that instance. And last potential situation for the interaction phase is that if you have no character and it is your turn, whether or not your opponent has a character doesn't matter. Nothing in this column will happen. Your opponent doesn't get to direct hit you. It just is ignored. So that is the interaction phase and all the potential happenings that will go on during that phase. But an important thing to know for why we are progressing our story is that thus far, every single stage 4 story card has had the ability of, when you reach this stage, you win the game. That's kind of the main way that you win the game. There is one other way to win the game, that is, if a player's deck fully runs out of cards and they would have to draw a card while there's nothing in their deck, they lose the game. So you can lose by decking out, or you can win by reaching the last stage of your story. You can win if your opponent decks out as well. So that's the 2 ways that the game can reach its end. After the interaction phase has happened, we move on to the end phase, where players examine their hand of cards and see whether they have 10 or more cards. If they have more than 10 cards, they have to discard cards that they don't want until they only have 10 cards in their hand. That is their 10 card maximum hand size at the end of the turn. After that, our opponent's turn begins and they run through the same phases of readying all of the cards that they have in play, drawing a card, putting a new scene card from the top of their scene deck into play, and playing any cards in their hand before moving to the interaction phase, interacting with either having two characters in the same column, having their character be in a column where ours does not have a character for a direct hit, or skipping over any columns where they do not have a character. And they will do it in the same direction as we do, left to right of the player who went first in the game. There are a few abilities that I will quickly give you a rundown of that are on the characters, because I have shown you the abilities that occur while cards are in the adventure zone, and this symbol here means to kneel it, which is to turn it sideways. There are abilities on characters that happen in the adventure zone that do not need you to kneel the card. These effects will just happen while they are in the adventure zone, which is one of those 3 columns. Now, there is also the plan abilities, which we went over, that occur when this card is revealed as a plan card on top of a story card. There are debut effects. These effects happen when you play the card into one of your empty columns in your adventure row. So, for example, this Twilight Sparkle here has a debut effect that gives it +2 inspiration for the turn. So the turn this Twilight Sparkle comes out, it will have 6 inspiration for engaging with our opponent's characters. And then there are farewell effects. Farewell effects happen when a character is moved from our adventure zone to our rest area. So let's say that this Spike was versing this Pinkie Pie, and they decide to inspire their Pinkie Pie to the point where it can defeat our Spike. We weren't able to inspire our Spike any because our cards were the Golden Oak Library, which couldn't inspire Spike characters. So this Spike lost the interaction and is moved to our rest area. If Spike had any items attached that were allowed to be attached to Spike, they would go there with him, and then his farewell ability would trigger. So this farewell ability has you draw 2 cards and discard 1 card. Now there's also a type bar here. So this card is a dragon, Spike the Dragon. You've got this card here is a Pegasus Rainbow Dash, and that's how you work out what card type they are. They have their name, and also they've got a collector number. Now, when building your deck of cards, you're allowed to have up to 4 copies of any card with the same collector number, not the same name. So you're allowed to have as many Twilight Sparkles as you want, as long as they're all different Twilight Sparkles, which is really cool. You can also include any kind of pony or creature that you want in your deck. And because whatever scene cards you're kneeling to produce the harmony to pay their cost doesn't matter, you could play a deck that has all 6 of the main 6, or just the side characters, or a full deck of pets. It doesn't matter. Your scene deck can be any 15 scene cards. They don't all have to be the same. Now, there is an exception to the rule of only being allowed to have 4 copies of any card with the same collector number in your deck, because that does apply to the scene deck as well. If a card, you see there's the name, and then that little box up there, that is the daily symbol. When a card has daily, you're allowed any number of it in your deck, which is why we have 15 of these for our scene deck. This has gotten a little bit messy here with my explaining, but that is basically everything that I can think of when it comes to this card game. I hope that has helped you to learn how to play, but I know that sometimes playing the game is the best way to learn, as opposed to just listening to the rules. So if you are interested in actually playing the game, there's a few ways that you can do that. You could go and get yourself a set of all of the decks and play them. But they are all in Chinese only at the moment. Kayou and Hasbro are planning a full global launch in multiple languages. So if you're patient, you could pick up a set then. Or if you're like me and you just can't wait to get into playing with and collecting these lovely cards, I am able to translate these cards. And if you're interested, you could drop a note down in the messages of this video and tell me if you'd like me to make translation videos for any of the deck content. That way you could know what your cards do. Or you could even get on Google Translate or whatever other translator you want and translate them yourself. But maybe you don't want to get the cards, but you would still like to try and play the game. You could also join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to in the description. There is currently available a mod for the video game tabletop simulator that allows you to play the My Little Pony card game right now online with your friends. If you want, you can come join my server, find plenty of people who are all interested in playing the game, and have some fun. I would love to see the community get together and be able to share the joy of playing and collecting this wonderful game. And otherwise, you can always subscribe and wait for my gameplay videos that I'm going to be posting as soon as I get a camera stand that can actually do a top-down view to make it a lot clearer as to what is going on these fields. So, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Like it if you did. And I wish you all a wonderful day. Ta-ta for now.